afternoon, everyone. This is Idalee DiGregorio from Bryn Mawr. I am here today in my kitchen to work with you on getting ready for your Thanksgiving meal. So I know Thanksgiving is going to be different for all of us this year, but we're still going to make it yummy, and we're still going to make it based on Baltimore. So since we're all had our high school time here, we thought that Baltimore recipes would be a great idea. So first we're going to make a dressing. We're going to make oyster, sausage, and cornbread stuffing. You can either stuff it in your turkey, which makes it a stuffing, or you can put it in a baking dish, which makes it a dressing. That's the only difference. So we're going to do that first, and then we're also going to make some sauerkraut, because here in Baltimore we love to have sauerkraut with all of our holiday meals. It seems to come from the German heritage that was predominant here in Baltimore for a long period of time. But we're going to, just doll it up a little bit and make it just a little bit more yummy and maybe a little more acceptable to all of your family. So the ingredients we're going to need for our dressing slash stuffing is, we're going to start with some cornbread. This is cornbread, it's Pepperidge Farm cornbread stuffing mix. It is the best. But you can also make your own cornbread and then just put it in the oven, crumble it up, put it in the oven, and it'll dry out and use that. But this is a whole lot easier and still really tasty. So we also are going to use some sausage. You can use any kind of sausage you like. I like Bob Evans. I like spicy sausage. So this is a spicy sausage, but you can use Polish sausage or Italian sausage or any kind of country sausage. We're going to use some lovely shucked oysters from Wycomico County here in Maryland. Any kind of oysters will do, but you want to make sure that they're shucked in their liquor. The liquor is important. We're going to use that in the stuffing as well. We're also we need some really nice good butter. So I love Kerrygold butter. Good butter makes a big difference. So buy good butter. I have some sage here from my garden. I keep a nice herb garden, so we're going to use sage, but you can buy that at the store. An onion, some celery. And then, of course, because it's Baltimore, we need some Old Bay. All right, so to start the process, we're going to start with our sausage because we want to get that cooked first. So remember, you always want to use a different cutting board for meat than you do for your veg. So we're going to use this nice purple cutting board because it lets us know that this one is a separate cutting board. So we just start by, cutting off the end of your sausage. You got nice sausage, and then we're gonna just squeeze it into our pan. You wanna make sure you get it all out because we want it in our stuffing, not just in the package. All right, there we go. And then we're gonna turn on our stove. We're gonna turn it on medium so that we don't overcook our sausage. I have a really hot stove, so I turn it a little less than medium. So depending on how your stove works, that will determine which, whether it's medium or a little below. Okay, so you just want to cut it up with a sturdy spatula so that we get all the little pieces, and because you're really going to want it crumbled up in your stuffing. So you just cut it up into pieces, and you're going to let it cook and flip it around a little bit as you need to as it starts cooking. So we just want to get it thoroughly cooked. So there we go. That's good enough for right now. And then as we need it, we'll break it up some more. So we're going to just throw our wrapper out. Now, one of the things that I always do is I always keep a bowl for my trash. And I keep it on my work spot so I don't have to keep going back and forth for the trash can. So that's always helpful. All right. So in terms of our celery and our onions, we're just going to cut them up into thin bite-sized pieces so that they mesh with the cornbread and the sausage really well in our stuffing. Again, you're going to cut off the little ends. We put those in our trash bucket. That's why we have it right here. And that way we don't have to keep walking around. Cut off our ends again, and there we go. So you want to be careful with your knife, obviously. But one of the things I do is I always line my celery up so that, and against the knife, so that I can do it all at one time, which makes it a whole lot more efficient. But you could use a mandolin if you wanted. You can cut it by hand. You can use a mandolin, whatever. But we want something like that. That's really what we're looking for. Something nice and thin. And we're just going to cut it up real quick. It's not real hard to do. I love the smell of celery. Did you know that celery is one of the only vegetables that has a negative calorie count? It takes more calories to chew your celery than it does than the celery has. So it's always a nice thing to add into things. And it gives that nice sort of salty, almost briny flavor, which is going to go really well with our oysters. All right. So there we are. We're all cut up. We're going to put it in a bowl. So I just keep my empty bowls right here. And the celery and the onions can go in the same bowl together because they're going to go into our frying pan together as well. So there we go. I like to use, when onion-wise, I like to use Vidalia onions. They have a nice sweet taste to them. They're super easy to peel as well, which I really appreciate because peeling an onion is always a pain in the neck. But they're a real nice fast peel. And I'm going to show you some really easy tips for how to cut up your onion. All right, so peeled, that was pretty fast. We're going to cut it in half this way so it can sit very flat on your cutting board. And then we're just going to cut on a diagonal through the onion. Not all the way through, but just nice little cuts. This is going to make it so it's chopped all the way when we're done. So it's going to take really very few cuts. So, okay, so we've done that. We're going to cut the little front off, throw that away, and then we're going to just cut up our onion. And you'll see that it's automatically in nice little pieces. All right, and then we just put that in there. And we do the same with the other half. And you just see how fast it goes. Super fast. And there we go. Onion is finished. So let's deal with our oysters. So this is probably the ickiest part of the whole thing, just because oysters are kind of slimy. They taste amazing, but they are kind of slimy. So you want to set yourself up with a bowl and some kind of sieve. I like the little one like this, but it can be a bigger one, whatever you want. But you want to make sure that you still have your liquor, your oyster liquor, so you just want to drain them and keep that liquor. So I'm just going to pour the liquor off and pour the oysters in there. And then just let them soak them, drain them in it. All right, so we're going to do that. And while that's happening, we're going to deal with our sage. So like I said, this sage is from my garden. I have the biggest sage plant, and it is a pain because we only use sage once or twice a year, mostly with turkey. So it is its big day. And we're just going to take off, you want about 2 tablespoons of sage. Not a lot, depends on what you like. So the nice thing about cooking is you can cook it to your taste. So my taste might be different than your taste, and that's okay. So I know everybody likes to follow recipes, but the truth is you don't have to follow that closely. You just want the right amount of ingredients. And I'm going to teach you how to make sure that it doesn't get too wet. And in the end, so that you can add as much of the oyster liquor as you like, or you can substitute other things. So some people don't like it so oystery either. All right, so we've just taken our sage and we've broken it up. And now we're just going to do a little quick rough chop on it. And then a little dice. And we just keep moving it around. Sage is a little bit tough, so you have to do a little bit of extra pressure. If this were parsley or something like that, it wouldn't be quite so, you wouldn't need as much pressure, but you need kind of a little bit of pressure when you're doing sage. All right, let's go check our sausage. All right, you can see that most of it is not pink anymore. So we just want all the pink gone. So I'm thinking it's going to be about a minute more, and then we'll be good to go. And we are going to strain our sausage so that we can make sure that it doesn't get too greasy in our pan. All right. I think that's just about there. All right, so what I've done is I've got a bowl here, and I put a little bit of paper towel in it, so that we can put this sausage into the bowl and let it absorb the extra grease. That way you just don't end up with sort of greasy stuffing, which is nobody's favorite thing. So we're just gonna put it up here, and then we can use our pan again for our onions and our celery and our seasonings. All right, there we go. We got it all out. All right, so we're back here at our cutting board. What we need to do is get our butter. So the Kerrygold butter is, it's an 8-ounce block of butter. We want about 4 ounces of butter, so we're gonna say half. And 4 ounces of butter, if you're doing stick butter, is just 1 stick. But like I said, I like the really good, yummy butter, and this is the best. All right, so we have a big hunk of butter. I know, lots of butter. And we're gonna put that in our pan. All right, so we're just in that same pan where we just did that meat. We're putting this butter, and we're gonna let that melt all the way. And if you cut it up a little bit, it melts faster, but I didn't do that. So I can do it in the pan though. All right, and then we're gonna just add our celery and our onions. And the rest of that butter will melt while this is cooking. Okay, we're gonna cook them until they're translucent. And then we can add our sage and our Old Bay. So the sage we've got, over there, that's about 2 tablespoons worth. And then the Old Bay, 2 teaspoons should do you. Okay, so this is what they're gonna look like. You have your onions in here, you have your celery, and then we have our sage and our Old Bay, and of course our nice butter. And you can see the butter in that bowl. We want to keep all that butter. That's going to help your stuffing taste really great. All right, so now we're going to deal with our oysters. So since we are done with all our cutting all of our vegetables up, we're going to use the same cutting board for our oysters. But if you had not finished all of your vegetable, you would use a separate cutting board. Just want to make sure we all know that. All right, so this is what they look like once they've been drained, and we're just going to put them out on our cutting board here. Okay, so each oyster has what's called a foot, and the foot is the attachment that it has to the shell. It's going to look something like that, a little half moon shaped. And we just want to make sure we take the feet off of all of our oysters. So you're just going to go through and take your feet off. And then you're going to give them a nice little chop and they'll be ready. All right, so once you've got the feet off, now you're going to just do your chop. So it's just a rough chop. You don't want to mangle them too badly, but just a little rough chop to make them a nice size. All right, there we go. They don't look super appetizing, but I'm telling you, they're great. And especially nice Maryland oysters, always the best. All right, so now we get to put everything together. This is the exciting part. So we take our cornbread stuffing mix, or the cornbread you made and then nicely toasted, and you're just gonna throw it in the bowl. And then you're just gonna throw the rest of this in the bowl. So this is your mixture of the onions and the celery and the spices and the butter, and that just goes in the bowl. And then we're also going to put our sausage in that we have on the paper towel, so now it's not so oily, so that goes in there because you've got the butter, so you don't want too much oil. And then, so now you're just going to mix these together, and you're going to be like, Idalee, that's so dry. Yes, it is. But we're going to add a little milk, and we're going to add some of that oyster liquor, and that's going to help us. And remember, we haven't added our oysters yet. So here we go. We're going to add our oysters. I like to get everything sort of mixed up together before we put the oysters in, so that the oysters you don't have to push them around too much. All right, so this is what everything looks like at this point. Looks pretty yummy already. And now we're going to add our oyster liquor. So I'm going to suggest that you add about half the liquor that came with your oysters. So there we go, half our liquid. And again, we're going to just mix this up together, and we're going to see how we're doing. Because we don't want it to get too wet, but we don't want it to be too dry. Dry stuffing is terrible. It's really bad. I know, because I've made it before. By accident, obviously. All right, and then we're going to take our milk, and we're going to put enough milk in so that when we take a handful and we just squeeze it tight, it'll come together as a ball. There we go. A nice toss. And now we're going to try it. So it's still dry, obviously, because it hasn't had time to absorb the liquid. But when I do that, it comes to a nice ball. And since I feel like it's dry, even though there's a little extra liquid, I don't feel like it's too much. So I think we'll be okay. If you want to let it sit for a little while, you can do that. Obviously, because it's oysters, you want it to sit in the refrigerator if you're going to let it sit so that it absorbs the liquid. We do want it to absorb the liquid, so I would at least let it sit for about a half an hour before you put it in the pan. All right, so we're gonna butter our dish. I'm just gonna cut a little piece of this butter and use it on a paper towel just like that. And we're just gonna use our hands heat will melt the butter so that we can then butter our dish. This way we can get the stuffing out of here when we're done, or the dressing at this point. We're making dressing because it's going in a pan and not into your turkey. But again, put it in your turkey, it'd be yummy too. And then we're just gonna put our stuffing, our dressing in the pan. And then it's gonna cook in the oven at 350 for about 40 minutes. And I would cover this with some aluminum foil. There we go. Oh, it's perfect. See how nicely it's sticking together, but it's not real gloppy. You can't see any liquid on the bottom. That's what we want. All right, there we go. Now it goes in the oven. Okay, so now the last thing, or the next thing that we're gonna make is our sauerkraut. So I do not make sauerkraut from a cabbage. You can, but we had to start 4 weeks ago. So it's pretty easy to make sauerkraut from cabbage. It's really just salt and cabbage. And then depending on how sweet you want it, or if you want vinegar, you can add vinegar, but it's really just fermented cabbage. So, but you have to start at least 4 weeks in advance. I, on the other hand, just like to buy sauerkraut. Sauerkraut also does not smell very good when you are fermenting it in your house. So make sure that you have a place outside of your house to ferment it. So we're gonna put it in a sieve just to let the juice out of it. So depending on how sour you like your sauerkraut, you can rinse sauerkraut. I know a lot of German ladies who would tell me that that is a sin, but some people just don't like it to be as salty. And so they just rinse it a little bit in water. And just cool water. And I've taken it, I have it draining its liquid because sauerkraut, as you know, like the liquid of it is super salty and it has kind of a little bit funky taste. So you just want to get rid of it. And that's why some people rinse it. I personally love the taste of sauerkraut, so I'm not going to rinse it, but I am just going to drain it. Okay, so now we're going to go and we're going to add an apple. So apple really makes it great. It gives a sweetness to it, and kids like the apple part. So I always found that if you added an apple, it's more people will eat it, actually. You can add 1 apple, you can add 2 apples. Depends on how sweet you want it. I like a really good tart apple, Granny Smith, an Empire, or a Macintosh, something like that. Stamen is a great apple, and of course this is apple season. So it's really fun to get the good apples, and a nice apple that's firm. All of those that I mentioned are nice and firm. So we're just going to take the peel off, and we're going to put our peel into our garbage bucket that we still have. Just put that over there, and now we're going to just core our apple and slice it so that it can go in with our sauerkraut. This is, you got to be careful when you're doing this because you don't want to cut your fingers off. And several times my children have commented that I cut towards my hand with that maneuver, and it's true, I do, and you're really not supposed to do that, but it's one of my little cooking habits to do, especially with apples. You can use a corer if you want. Because I was just using 1 apple, I didn't think it was worth having another utensil out, but yeah, you could use an apple corer if you're making a lot of sauerkraut. All right, so we're just gonna slice it in little slices, and then we're gonna cut it so it's littler pieces so that it'll really cook well in the sauerkraut. So we're just gonna add that to our pot, and our sauerkraut. The next thing we're gonna do is add our sauerkraut in as well. I mean, this is a super easy recipe. I'm telling you, it's so easy. So we've drained it, you've rinsed it if you want, and then you're just gonna add it in. And you're like, but Idalee, you took all the liquid out. Not to worry, the liquid will come back. The sauerkraut has a lot of liquid in it, and as you warm it up, some of the liquid will come back. And we're gonna put just a little bit of water in it to start to get it going. So, and the apples are also gonna release their liquid. So this is caraway seeds. Caraway seeds are very German. They're in rye bread, and they are so good with sauerkraut. So we're just gonna put in, I just put in a little handful. Not a lot, you just want it speckled around in there. And if you like more, you can put in more. The nice thing is you can add caraway seeds while it's cooking so that you can get it exactly the flavor you want. So the big thing is you should always try your food. Make sure you always try your food, because then you know you're serving the best. All right, so here we are. We have our sauerkraut, we have our apple, we have our caraway seeds, and this is a cup of water. I'm gonna put in about a half of it just to give it a little bit of water. I don't wanna give it too much water. And then we're just gonna stir it up a little bit so that all the pieces are there. We're gonna put a top on it. We're gonna let this simmer. We really don't want it to overcook. We just want it to simmer, and we're gonna let it simmer probably the next 20 minutes or so until the apple really falls apart and there's a good flavor in there. So periodically, I want you to come over. I want you to try it a little bit. Make sure that it tastes good. You have to like sauerkraut. Make sure it tastes good. And then at the end, you'll have this lovely sauerkraut dish. So that's all you do for the sauerkraut. It's pretty easy. All right. I think it's been about 40 minutes and we are good to go. Oh, that smells yummy and looks nice and golden brown. See that brownness? That's lovely. It's very hot, so I'm going to put it up here next to our sauerkraut, which is also done, my friends. So we cooked that about the same amount of time. It is nice and dry now. There is not any liquid in the bottom, so it's just a nice, lovely sauerkraut. So we just put these in some nice dishes, and you can put them on your holiday table. I hope everybody has a really great Thanksgiving, and we'll see you all at the reunion, I hope. Have a great one.